Hello, welcome to the studio, welcome to the channel. My name is Kavin Campbell and I am an artist. Today we are going to be finishing up the commission portrait of my good friend and sister Gina, and today I will be speaking about her. If you have watched the other episodes, I spoke in depth about a number of different subjects, and I would often promise that on the last episode I would discuss my friendship with Gina. So today the topic is friendship or family. So previously I posted a couple episodes where I was in the very beginning stages of this, and in the first episode I actually talked about Gina. So if you got to see that, then this might be a little repetitive for you, since I have deleted those things. Maybe this is going to be your first introduction. Let me go back many moments ago, back in our young lives. I was in 8th grade in Mr. Krenko's class in Oak Knoll Middle School. And Mr. Krenko was a very good teacher, and he had in his class what I would say is most of the misfits. And somehow or another, he managed to have us seated in alphabetical order, but he had us seated in such a way where all of the troublemakers were up close to his desk so that he can be sort of within eyeball reach of us. And although we were close to his desk, this seldom ever prevented us from acting out and, being a disruption in class. And that was certainly something that we did very well. But then one day, I remember the moment very clearly, because I was sitting next to a good friend of mine, and I was pretty much in the business at this point in time of being flirtatious. My hormones and puberty were at the peak of their rage, and I was certainly trying to pick at this young lady to pique her interest. Her and I were pretty good friends, and I knew her mother. Her mother was the school bus driver that actually took us to school, so I was very good friends with her mother. And I was one of those children that I was, as bad as I was just as much loving. So it was very easy for a lot of people to overlook my negativities for the potential of my positivities, right? But either way, I was in the business of getting under this young lady's skin, and she was doing a very good job of thwarting all of my advances. And so in a moment of frustration, I kind of just decided, well, me and the boys would just start cutting up. And in the process of this, the door knocked. And one of the teacher lady types from the office came in, and she had 2 young ladies with her. And she said that we got a couple new students in, and your class is the only class with some spare rooms, so we're going to put them in here. And one of those young ladies was Gina. And immediately upon looking at both of these young ladies, I knew instantly that they were both out of my league. They were both very gorgeous young ladies. And I was one of those people that, although I was very flirtatious, I kind of knew my limitations. I kind of knew when there were people that I could, flirt with and get along with and mess around with that, I felt like on some level or another were easy catches, right? And the ones that I could tell quite clearly that were out of my league, it was like, oh, well, I might as well not even try to even advance towards those young ladies, right? But for some strange reason, throughout the rest of the year, Gina and I sort of became good friends. I would certainly say that she found it difficult in her transition to come from where she came from into our small little town here in New Jersey. And as being the gregarious and charismatic individual that I was, it wasn't very difficult for me to make friends, and somehow or another, we became kind of good friends. Now, at the time, I was living in a place called the Champaign Apartments, which would basically be described as the hood of our tiny little town in Williamstown. And it was, the nickname for this place was the Pain, because all of us were bad little kids, really. But after 8th grade, my mother, who was a nurse, started to, make some advances in our lives, and we moved into a little bit better neighborhood. Well, I wouldn't say a little bit, a lot of bit better neighborhood, where most of the people in Williamstown, this little development was called Forest Hills. And it was, for all intents and purposes, the Beverly Hills of Williamstown. And my mother managed to get herself a nice little cottage house in the back where they had added on some new houses to the development. It really wasn't a part of the original development, but it was still in the add-on part. And so we were still technically in Forest Hills. And in moving to that neighborhood, it was one of those things where, I started to feel a little bit differently about myself. My mom finally had a little bit of money in her pocket. Money can make things change, right? Well, one day it was time to go to school, and I got up, as I normally did, and found myself out there at the bus stop. And there was a young lady there who I knew. That was, her house was right there on the corner of this bus stop, and she liked me a little bit, and I kind of didn't really like her like that. It was one of those things where, I was the hunter and I was not the hunted. And so if they showed interest in me that way, I didn't really return the favor. So I really wasn't much interested in her. And so she was trying to invite me to sit in her seat on the bus when the bus came, and I was like, I'm not really interested in that. Well, eventually the bus came, and I got on the bus. I followed the little girl on the bus, and I got on the bus, and then, she got into her seat, and she looked at me with these baby doll eyes, and I just kept on pushing, because coming from the Pain, we were the types of kids that, found our way to the back of the bus where we could do the most cutting up, And as I looked, I saw that the back seat was empty, so I quickly made haste to the back seat. And I went and sat down in the back seat, and it was wonderful because, I had pretty much the whole back of the bus to myself. And, although I wasn't really the type at that point in time to cut up by myself, I was back there pretty much alone. And then the next stop comes up, and I see this young lady at the bus stop, and she sort of looked familiar. And then when she got on the bus, I was like, oh, what do you know? That's Gina, right? And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, I didn't know she lived over here, and I didn't realize that she lived so close. And she started coming towards the back of the bus, and lo and behold, she comes in, plops down in the back seat right next to me, and she looks at me with the look that only Gina could ever really give you. And she looked at me and she said quite clearly, "What are you doing in my seat?" And I was immediately taken back, because I was like, I felt like, in the previous year, we had developed a little bit of a friendly rapport. And at this point, she seemed like a little, aggravated, to say the least, that I was in her seat. And so, instantly my instinct was to just jump up and get out of there, but, where she sat, she had kind of sort of blocked me in, and she wasn't really going to move. So there I was in her back seat, and we sort of developed at that point, I had an instant sort of respect with her, because not too many people had the balls, even for a young lady, to, be crass with me, to be curt with me, you know what I mean? Where I come from and who I was made it so that, a lot of people had a little bit of a intimidation factor. But like I said, we had developed a little bit of a rapport in 8th grade. And so she certainly felt comfortable putting me in, I guess it would be her place, because it was her seat. But we quickly developed, because out of that, I was like, wow, she's a tough girl. She's a lot tougher than I thought. And so we became really close friends. And so subsequently, we moved on into our freshman year, 9th grade in Williamstown High School. And shortly after getting into the 9th grade, I found myself with lustful eyes for this young lady that would become my girlfriend. And I was all about being in love with her, right? And so we had, in our lunch period, I went and I sat down in an empty booth, and then the young lady that would become my girlfriend came and sat with us. But it was just me at the time. But then here's the thing, right? Gina had that same lunch period. And as I was what I would consider to be her only really friend at this point in time, she came and sat with us. And so in this booth, it was me, my girlfriend, and Gina. And at this point in time, I was, Gina was my friend, and I was still very much busy being infatuated with my girlfriend and, trying to be the boyfriend, girlfriend type thing. And that was okay for a little while. Our romance was, altogether, it ran about 17 months. But during that time, we had our moments where it was, more love than two people could hold. And at times it was more problems than two young people need to deal with. So we had this sort of off and on, back and forth type thing. And then when it finally all fell apart, she stopped sitting with me at lunch. And so it was pretty much just me and Gina at this point. And then after a while, because, she's still my ex-girlfriend, I should say, at this point, still had that lunch period. I don't know what it is that she did. She switched it up so that now she wasn't even in the lunch at the same period. And so, I didn't have to be looking over and seeing her sit with a whole other group of friends and being all heartbroken. And Gina, being my friend, sort of helped me through a lot of those misplaced feelings and hurt and all those. She did, what a good friend would do, and, try to, help someone through their heartache. And she did this very well. Now, mind you, at this point in time, I had, to be quite honest with you, started to develop a little bit of feelings. You get that sort of what they call the Florence Nightingale syndrome, right? The nurse that's healing you fall in love with, right? And that was kind of sort of taking place. But then something happened in my life that changed everything. My mother had been in a car accident maybe a year or so prior to that, and then I was in the car and I got a settlement. And when I got this settlement, the first thing that I did was I ran out and bought a car. I bought a 1978 Pontiac Trans Am, and this car was built for racing. And so at this point, I was no longer on the bus, and I was driving back and forth to school. I had recently started working at Pizza Hut, and so I had a job, I had a car, and I had, the freedom that a young freshman in high school didn't deserve to have, really. And I had money in my pocket, and I could do all kinds of things. And really, at this point in time, the only time I would ever really see Gina was at this, booth in the lunchroom during lunch period, And, it was one of those things where we would chit chat and we became good friends. But, now being someone who is out and about running around in the world, I was able to find myself another young girlfriend and, live a whole nother life. The Pizza Hut that I worked at was a couple towns away. So I was exposed to a whole new crop of people, and, life just sort of took me off in that direction, And I remember distinctly one time, little bit before I got my newest girlfriend, that Gina had invited me over to her house. And, I think we were going to watch Star Wars. I can't remember quite clearly. But I remember at this time, I had sort of reevaluated my Florence Nightingale syndrome and realized that Gina was really so much better for me as a friend than trying to say ruin that romantically. And I feel like her mentality was very much the same way. And so we were, very good friends. And if you hear my dogs barking in the background, they're barking at nothing again. But then shortly after I got my job at Pizza Hut and was doing my thing, I remember sitting at the lunch table, and she told me that her father was going to move to Vermont. And shortly after that, that's exactly what happened. And I pretty much lost my friend Gina forever, I thought, you know what I mean? And it hurt because, you don't ever want to lose friends, and especially good friends, But, teenage years, life in high school, having a job and a car, you can kind of get past those things because every day is a new adventure. And so such is life, right? And as life would have it, many, 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 many years would go by. A lot of things would happen in my life. I would do a lot of different things. I would join the Air Force. I would get married. I would have a tattoo career, a comic book career. I would open up tattoo shops. I would publish comic books, and all kinds of things would happen. I would get divorced. I would go through a couple different relationships, and all kinds of things would happen. And then I found myself at some point in time being on Facebook. And I wasn't really a big fan of Facebook because Facebook had ruined 2 of my relationships, and I wasn't really in Facebook. But at this point in time in my life, I had retired from doing tattoos, and I was in a relationship with a woman, and we were about to have a baby. And I was starting to build a career painting, being an artist. And so I needed to get on Facebook in a way to sort of market myself in social media and put my work out there and get myself going. And Facebook has this way, right? Because, you become friends with, it reconnected me with a lot of people that, I went to high school with. And it was strange how connecting with friends on Facebook, that when you become friends with one, right, then you're exposed. Facebook exposes you to people you may know, right? And somehow through all of that, Gina popped up. And I thought to myself, that can't possibly be that Gina. But she has a very distinctive last name. I've never heard this last name with anybody else ever. And so it was undoubtedly her. And when I looked at the picture, I thought to myself, wow, she has changed dramatically. She doesn't look like the Gina I remember. But then, at this point, we're kicking on to being like 30 years away. You know what I mean? And so I imagine I don't look much the same as I did in high school either. And so, I did what I was doing at the time, in reconnecting with a lot of old friends from high school. I sent her a friend request. And I would say, a month or 2 went by, before she, contacted me back. And the way that contact came back, it was in such a way that it was like she didn't believe that it was me, And at the same time, I still wasn't quite sure that this was her. Now, at this point in time, Facebook had been around for a few years, and there were a lot of people that were on Facebook that were on Facebook, but they weren't on Facebook. So in reaching out to them, though they had a profile, they weren't on Facebook to even realize that you sent a friend request. But sure enough, she reached out and we reconnected. And at this point in time, we sort of caught up after all of those years, and we found ourselves being those same 2 people that were in the back seat of the bus, in the booth at the lunch table, and, rehashing everything that has happened in our lives over the past 30 years. We talked about, marriages and having kids and places where we lived, and, how life and everything carried us through the world till we were at this point. And I was distinctly happy to have reconnected with someone that was such a special friend. And I was doing different things in life. And one of the things that I was doing was I was learning how to make pizza from scratch. Now, like I said, I worked at Pizza Hut, so I had a pretty good foundation of how to make pizza, right? But I was living in a small little town in Texas, and they don't know how to make pizza down there. There's not nearly enough Italian people down there that showed any of those people down there in cowboy hats and cowboy boots how to make a good pizza. So the best options that I had was Pizza Hut, and by this time Pizza Hut was not the same. And otherwise, I was never a big fan of Domino's, and the only other thing that was out there was Little Caesars, so it was very important to me that in raising my son, now we've had, visited home, and I've put in his mouth the absolute best pizza in the world, Palermo's Pizza in Williamstown, New Jersey. If you're ever there, get yourself a pie. You will not be disappointed. But I was like, I need to know how to make some pizza. I need to learn. And so I started really getting into it and developed recipes, from scratch, made myself some really, really good pizza. And Gina, being the great friend that she is, she sent me some, 00 pizza flour. That's hard to come by, especially down there. It was hard to come by. She sent me some pizza flour, but more importantly, she sent me some pizza sauce that was made in Williamstown, New Jersey. There's a little place over here where they make it. And it was one of those things that when you smelled the tomatoes in late August, you knew that it was time for school to start, because the smell of tomatoes pretty much covered the whole town. Well, she sent me, a case of this tomato sauce for pizza sauce. And it was like, man, it brought me right back to those days, right back to home. It brought me home. And, she's an incredible baker. And so she would, over the, Christmas, she would send us, cookies and different treats and stuff like that for my family. And it was just one of those things where it was a true, absolute blessing to have her reconnected in my life. She had some medical difficulties, and we would chit chat about, her recovery, and, I was going through things, and, it was just another one of those things where a good friendship had redeveloped, and I was certainly thankful for that. And then it was just one of those things where, I was at a point in my life where a lot of things had happened, and I was taking inventory of my friends. And it became quite clear to me that there was a distinction in my life between the people that were my friends and the friends that were more important to me than just friends. And then at that point, I stopped calling my friends friends. If I felt like if you were my friend, then you didn't really know me very well, and that you were pretty much trying to get something out of me, right? And so at that point, I made the distinction, and I reclassified a lot of those friends, and I made them family. A lot of my friends that were males became my brothers. And, that's one of those things, and, a lot of my friends that were females became my sisters. And what I learned and what I had decided at that point is, like a lot of people say, you can't pick your family, but you can pick your friends, right? And at that point in time in my life, I realized that a lot of my friends were closer to me than a lot of my family. And so they shifted, and then they all became my family. And some of them, it took them off guard a little bit. One friend in particular, her name is Melanie. I stopped calling her my friend and I started calling her my little sister. And at first she was a bit taken back by that because, she never really considered herself having a big old black man being her brother. But, she went through some things in her life that I helped her out with. And certainly she realized that she was my little sister and I was her big brother, right? And it was kind of the same for Gina. I felt like, when I started looking at her as family, I started calling her my sister. And I felt like, that might have, made her feel a little bit uncomfortable. Gina is an only child, so she didn't have real sisters or real brothers. And it was one of those things where it was one of the, how can I put it? It was one of those things where if you see yourself as a good friend to somebody and they turn you into family, I guess you start wondering if your value to them is greater than you feel your value is to them. And I didn't mean to make her feel uncomfortable in any way, but she was my sister. And once you became that person in my life, once you made the transition from the friend zone to the family zone, well, then to me, family is forever. Friends are fleeting, but family is forever. And then subsequently, from that time until now, Gina has proven to me to be one of the most important sisters I have ever had in my life. Even more in some cases than my own real sister. She has helped me through so many things, and her fantastic husband, Paul, they got married here recently, and I wish that I could have attended their wedding. Forgive my dog again, she's probably barking at nothing. But I had recently moved back to New Jersey because I lost both my parents in 2020, literally not too much more than a month apart. But so now I was back up here in New Jersey, closer to them in Vermont, and she sent me an invitation to their wedding. But so many things were going on in my life with the loss of my parents and then just financial difficulties. It was just impossible for me to go up there and make it. I was there in spirit, and I was hugging both her and Paul with all my heart, and happy for them both. They have bought several different paintings for me and commissions for me, and they have kept me going and kept me through a lot of hard times. And so Paul has never met me. I did a skateboard for him a couple years ago of his Bulldog Easton, and Paul's from London, or no, he's actually from Liverpool, and his soccer team is what I put on there, the logo for his soccer team. And I have a niece that lives in Wales, so I have a love for those people over there across the pond. And it was just one of those things where and I consider him my brother, though we've never met or spoken. And just because he's married to my wonderful sister, and they have a wonderful family, and I just wish them the absolute best in everything that should ever happen to them in the future. As I make this video today, the video that you're looking at, I painted it on December 31st, 2022, and it is being completed on January 1st, 2023, over the weekend. And recently I suffered a tremendous tragedy in my life. I'm not going to go into it because it's personal, but it was one of those things that during this most difficult time, it did my heart a lot of good to paint a good friend of mine, a good sister of mine. And it was, in being home alone through all of this, it was comforting to have, the opportunity to do this painting, because, her good vibes, her good spirit, and her good heart helped me through this difficult time. To be quite honest with you, this was going to be the last commission, the last painting I was ever going to do. But I've had some conversations with some friends that helped me to realize that I should always be an artist, that I should never quit. And so this was one of those things where it was going to be the last one, but as it turns out, it was the first one. And so I'm very glad and happy to share with you this final painting of 2022 and the first painting of 2023, and just how happy I am to still be able to continue to move forward in my art career and art life, and to be able to go through this rough transition, painting someone that is very special to me, very meaningful to me, and someone that I love very much. It helped me, and I can't explain to her on any level how much it has helped me. So as I do this voiceover, it is the 12th of January. She received her painting yesterday. Her and Paul recently had a wonderful vacation in Costa Rica, and as soon as they returned home, the package was there on their porch. And so they returned home from a great vacation to find the painting there. And from what I was told, that they love the painting. I'm happy that they do. I'm glad that they do. And I hope that it blesses their household and their families for generations to come. Now, to be quite honest with you, at this point in time today, I don't have any more commissions on my books. And I haven't painted anything since I put the brush down on this painting. But I have some things that are developing, and I'm working towards those things. I'm not living my life putting all my eggs in the art basket. I am looking to move into a different career and different life, but I will always be an artist. I will always paint. It's just that I'm not going to put the pressure on myself to paint my way out of poverty. I'm going to simply continue to paint for passion. And with that, it was just one of those things where I feel like, I have returned to the person I was way back when in high school, where I painted for the love of it, where I painted for the joy of it, and I painted for me. Instead of, turning it into painting for profit, painting professionally, and trying to paint my way out of poverty. It didn't really work out that way, and it took me through it. But as they say, if you're in hell, if you're going through hell, keep going. And that is exactly what I've done, and that is exactly what I'm continuing to do. And as I look forward into my bright new future, into the career path that I'm going into, I am looking forward to the opportunity to paint for joy, like old Bob Ross would say, the joy of painting, and that's kind of something that has been rekindled in myself, to paint for the love of it, to paint for the passion of it, and not paint out of making it something that has to do something and do it for somebody else or whatever, So I would like here in this moment to formally say thank you to Gina and her wonderful husband Paul for getting me through some difficult times, for helping me with the commissions that I needed to help put food on the table and make sure the light bill was paid, that kind of thing. They helped me more than I could ever know, and all I could say is that as I painted this painting, I put everything that I had into it, everything that I have left, my whole heart, my whole soul into it, because like I said in the beginning, it was going to be the last one, and I was just going to dump everything I had. But in that transition, I came to a point where I realized that I was always going to paint, and it turned into the love of painting, and I continued to pour all of that into it, and I hope that it shows. I hope that whoever should happen to look upon this painting in their life, in their household, will see all of the love, all of the joy, and all of the passion that I have for painting, and all of my appreciation for my dear sister Gina. And with that being said, I'm just going to go ahead here and sign my name to this painting. And I never really too many times in life sign it with my last name. I would always sign it with my nickname and my pseudonym signature. But here I'm signing my last name because this to me is way more personal than, just some little kitschy nickname. And, I want them to know that it is the true essence of me from the very day I was born till the day I am now. So I sign my name Campbell and I put the date. And then I'm going to go out and I'm going to give it a little bit of a blast of glitter like I normally do. And then I'm going to give it a nice light coat of gloss to lock everything in. And then I'm going to pack it up and ship it out. And then, I'm going to hope that they receive it well. Now, like I said, at this point, I already know that they did. So here is the reference picture of my dear sister Gina. You may notice that I removed the little purse strap and the little string on her sweater because, those are not necessarily visually appealing. And I cleaned it up. And here is the final painting. This is the finished completion. And I hope that you can see quite clearly how it looks, how much it is done with a bit of an artistic flair, because I don't necessarily always stick 100% to the reference. Here's my heart, here's my love. Thank you for watching.